Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone back to Usuli, the first of a very exciting, a new halakha called the Book of Illuminations. It's been over a month, I guess, since we've been together, and it's really wonderful to be back. We have some changes and things happening here, so we're in a different space now, and we're on Zoom. We're doing a few things a little bit differently. And I'm so excited to be back. I wanted to share, first of all, that, there have been ongoing amazing khutbahs that have taken place in the last several weeks since we've been gone. If you haven't had a chance to watch, I wanted to highlight several of them because I thought that they were so life transforming. The first was called Muslim Exceptionalism and the Individual as Ummah, which was on the 12th of May. The one after that was called The Human Instinct for Beauty, Nurtured or Suppressed, which was on the 19th. And then the one this past Friday was The Argument, in quotes, Your Life Represents and the Palestine Industry. And I think that the thing that was really powerful about it was sort of the shift that I noticed. This is how I understood these important khutbahs. Sheikh gets up on the pulpit every Friday and recounts all of the things, or not all of the things, just a small portion of the things that are happening in the world that are really depressing and horrific, and really paint a picture that Muslims are really just in a state where when you're an observer, it's really hard to look at that and feel like there's something. What can I do to make a difference? When you hear about how much money some of these so-called Muslim governments have and what they're spending it on, how they are working with other governments to really certainly expand the Islamophobic narrative, how successful that whole narrative has been, and what that means for our world in terms of the numbers of refugees and orphans and people who are on the brink of famine and in horrible war-torn places. It's hard not to get really discouraged. And so the shift in the messaging that I heard for the first time, and I wrote about this in the weekly email, is the idea that in order to move forward, in order for us to actually fight back as Muslims, we should really focus on turning inwards and making ourselves exceptional at whatever we do. And this is a message that obviously is, has been reinforced through everything that we've done, with the halakas, with the khutbahs, with Sheikh's books, the idea that as an individual, we come to this world with God-given gifts, that we should figure out what those gifts are and embrace them and figure out how to serve God in that, but to truly be exceptional in our field, in our passions, in our strengths. So if you come and you are a musician, you're an artist, you're a scientist, you're a writer, or you have the skills to be a politician or an activist, that it's your job to figure out what is that special talent and gift and passion that you have, and how do you really excel at it, with the ultimate goal being that we as Muslims are representing our ummah as individuals. And that if ultimately we end up at the top of every field in good numbers, in a critical mass of numbers, we can start making a change. And the one of the khutbah where Sheikh talks about the individual as ummah, it was a really important message, because when you look at how Muslims feel about being part of an ummah, this sort of amorphous concept, it actually it doesn't give you that sense that you should focus on your own excellence. And in some ways it's kind of a downer, because you look around and you see that the ummah is in such a bad state. You see who is part of your ummah. Maybe you feel that, okay, well, the responsibility resides with someone else within the ummah to make a change, that I'm sort of powerless. And I think that this message of turning towards your own excellence and what difference you personally can make as a representative, is your own ummah representing God in this very, very dark time, is actually a really important message of empowerment. And I think from there, the next khutbah, The Human Instinct for Beauty, reconnected this idea of the importance of individual beauty. And it's not, it resides with every human being and everyone who was given, this very intuitive sense of what is right and wrong and beautiful, and embracing that. and also looking at, what do we as Muslims, as a community, do to either nurture that sense of beauty or suppress it. And the example that Sheikh used was that he had met someone who was a non-Muslim, who was a very beautiful person and who had a very strong sense of intuitive beauty. And the idea that, we want to invite this person, and I think this happens with converts too, when you meet people that you find are so beautiful and you want to invite them to Islam, you cannot help but think, well, okay, but what am I really inviting them to? If I take them with me to the Muslim community and they start meeting Muslims and they start getting told the things that we've all heard and, we get down about and that are irrational or ugly or backwards, what are we really inviting them to? And is that going to actually nurture this beautiful sense that's intuitive to them, or is it going to suppress it? And we as Muslims have to think about those things, and as a means for, reevaluating what can we do to change, our community spaces, our mosques, and even who we are in terms of our role in elevating and nurturing the beauty of other human beings. And then lastly, yesterday's khutbah, the argument that your life represents, was a really important, look at, every single thing you do as an individual is in fact an argument for something or against something. So when you choose to do something, whether it's, being on your cell phone or, talk to your friends or go out and, however you spend your time, whatever it is you're doing, you are spending that time, in an argument for something you believe in or something that you support or something that you are a part of. And then you also, on the flip side, have to look at, okay, well, what am I not doing? So if I am not spending my time, either, let's say, learning about the Islamic tradition or being an activist or standing up for, social justice, the things that you are not doing also is an argument for who you are as a person. And it's an important thing to look back, because at the end of your life, if you look back and you say, what did my life represent? What argument did I stand for? What did I not stand for? And again, that focus on the individual and, your empowerment as a person and how you can develop and make yourself, the best that you can be and serve God in all of that. So this threesome of khutbahs, I felt really, focused on this very important message. And I think that even when you look at now what we've done in completing the entire Quran, again, this was a really important message where you start with the foundations. You start by looking internally. You start by developing, who you are so that you can go forward and make a difference in the world. So I'm proud that a lot of the things that we do here, I think actually all the things that we do here really reinforce and give people the tools and the learning that they need to strengthen and empower themselves. And so moving forward, I'm so excited with tonight's, the start of this new halakha, which I don't really actually know how it's going to go or what it's going to cover exactly, but my understanding is that, again, it's a book of wisdoms that help us grow as individuals on that, on that path of excellence. So I wanted to share two more things before I go. So the first thing is, I mentioned in the last halakha several weeks back that we didn't really have a huge to-do launch about Volume 2 of the Prophet's Pulpit. So I just wanted to highlight it again. Now we're actually super proud of it. We were always super proud of it, but the color of it makes a difference because now it has its own identity. It's a bigger book. It's got 25 chapters as opposed to 22 in the first version here. So it's actually a little bit thicker. But what actually is really also important about it is what's in it. We have, well, let me just share with you the sections, and kudos to Joe as always, because he did such an amazing job. So the parts are the light of the Quran. So again, this, very important theme of light versus darkness, the light of the Quran. Part 2 is reason, dignity, and justice. Part 3 is, which I think is so important, on raising Muslim youth. We have 5 chapters that really focus on issues confronting the youth, but honestly, it's everyone, because it's, again, underlying this whole theme of, developing your own sense of pride as a Muslim, and then how you elevate yourself through your strengths and your gifts. Part 4 is lessons from history. Part 5 on racism and Islamophobia, which is extremely powerful because, some of these go back to, like, for example, the murder of George Floyd, even like why Jerusalem matters, and then we end on why despair is not an option. I mean, these chapters are just, so important for what we face today in 2023. Some of these chapters or khutbahs were given during the Project Illumine journey. So it's really amazing to see them come to life. And I'm again, super kudos to Joe, because it's a huge thing to come out with 2 books in a year's time. It's a lot of work. But I think when you read what's in it, I mean, these are just so powerful, so transformative, life transforming. I continue to get messages from all over the world about how Prophet's Pulpit made such a difference. And we still have the Share with a Friend campaign, and it really is only for the volume 1, because this is really the entry point. This is the starting of the journey, so people understand, it starts with the foundation, and then volume 2 builds on that and adds more depth and more sophistication. So we really want people who are new to Usuli or new to this approach to start here with volume 1. And I've also gotten some messages from people that they were embarrassed because they had already gotten 1 or 2 books and had 5 more friends that they'd like to share it with. So please, definitely, our goal is really to get this knowledge out and help make a difference in people's lives. So if you don't have the financial means to buy them a book, I mean, definitely, let us know. And even if you've already asked for 1 or 2 or 3 and you want more, I mean, we have actually people in prisons that are asking for books, people in book clubs, people in different organizations at universities, and we're happy to provide that, because I think if you can make a difference in one person's life, it's worth it. So don't be shy. And it's also added hasanet for the donor, who really, as I have said so many times, fell in love with this book and really wants to see it out there. And it's we've now sent it to well over 60 countries around the world. So it's a very cool project, and it'll continue to go as long as we can do it. Now, the last thing that I wanted to share with you is something that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks that I'm kind of excited about. So I'm doing kind of a launch, and it's a lot of people have written in the past saying that they wish that we offered a podcast. So they would like to listen to, the halakas or the khutbahs or whatever we do while they're driving, while they're working, while they're, doing other things that they need to do. And so that, plus the idea that I was looking for a new technology platform that could potentially help deliver the Sierra project, I found something that I thought was very cool. And so I wanted to launch today. If you are on the computer, check out, I'm going to actually share it on the screen. Usuli.supercast.com. So let me share the screen. It just went live earlier today. So this is a great way to listen to our content on your favorite podcast platform. So if you become a subscriber for $10 a month, or if you want to pay a year in advance, you get a discount. So it's $100 a year. You have access to our content, and it's ad-free, and you have your own private podcast feed, so you can connect it to Spotify, to Apple Music, to other podcast platforms. And we are right now, because I just have been working on this week, I have 18 episodes up, and these are the first 8 pilot episodes of the Project Illumine journey. So you can actually listen to those. We will also add khutbahs and previous stuff. So I just wanted to show this because it's very cool. And if you want to become a founding lifetime member, it's $1,500 that you can pay once, and then you get whatever is on here for free. And if you go and you sign up, this is what the sign-up page looks like. So you can see the different options: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and some other places. And it's $10 a month, and whatever, all of that funding is going to go towards supporting our work here. So as you know, we are 100% donor funded and 100% listener supported. And so it's important for us to, come up with new ways that we can generate funding. And, we have a lot that we want to do, whether it's, publish more Prophet's Pulpit or, can obviously continue to work on publishing the entire, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry. All right. Or, continue working on the publication of the tafsir, and also as we get into the seerah, this is all content and content that you guys have watched, whether it's, on sexual abuse and, all the stuff that we do. Ultimately, we would love to publish this as, a series of books that will live on as our legacy long after we're gone. So anyone who takes part in that, who supports our work, this is just another way, is part of this whole journey of what we leave behind. And so if you believe in what we do, if you believe in Usuli, you want us to continue working on what we're doing, then please do, sign up for your podcast or, continue to donate. And hopefully that will be an added value for those who really enjoy doing podcasts. So check it out. It's kind of new, so if you find that there's something that new to me, so I'm trying to still learn it. If you have any questions, just reach out and we'll figure it out together, and we'll hopefully make it great. So there's new stuff that will get uploaded over time, and you'll get emails, and you have access to actually watching the videos there. We will still have content that is on YouTube, but I know people have said that it's hard to listen to YouTube because you actually have to play YouTube. Some people really just want the podcast. It's nice to have it all in one place, easy to listen to. And then the benefit, we have also a really cool benefit for subscribers, which is we're moving to, there's an Ask Me Anything function there. So if you're a subscriber, you can actually suggest questions and you can upvote questions. So these are things then that we will hold on to and create Ask Me Anything episodes for the future. So we can address good questions for people. And so that way, actually, we're not going to do questions after these halakha sessions anymore, but we will do them on our AMA function. So that is it. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to be back, and I'm looking forward to an amazing evening with this new text. Thank you so much for joining us.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وسبحان الله والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى النبي الأمين محمد خاتم الرسل والأنبياء أجمعين المرسل رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين وعلى أصحابه المختارين وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي يا رب العالمين. So, inshallah, the first halaqah today, in terms of covering the articles of wisdom or the aphorisms, we will not get very far. We will probably just cover the very first one, and that will be quite enough for today. But let's situate all of this. So, Ibn Ata al-Sikandari is a Maliki scholar from the 13th century. He lived in Alexandria, Egypt, for the first part of his life, and then moved to Cairo, where he accepted a professorship and died in Cairo. And Ibn Ata al-Sikandari started out as a law scholar. While he was studying law, we through his own testament, we know that he was very critical of Sufism and Sufis, and looked at the general tradition of Sufism, as quite suspiciously, and was not a supporter of that tradition by any means. We are then told that he had a meeting, an encounter with someone who will become extremely influential in his life, and someone, if we had not become colonized intellectually, we would have been very aware of the significant impact of Ibn Ata al-Sakandari's teacher, Ibn al-Abbas al-Mursi, or al-Mursi. Egyptians in nowadays refer to him as Mursi ibn al-Abbas. That's Ibn al-Abbas al-Mursi. Anyway, and Ibn al-Abbas al-Mursi answers a question posed to him by Ibn Ata al-Sakandari, and Ibn Ata al-Sakandari is so blown away by the response and by the conversation that it entirely reshapes the trajectory of his life. And he ends up studying with Ibn al-Abbas al-Mursi for 12 years. He is his constant companion for 12 years, and becomes himself a master within the Sufi Shazli, the Shazli Tariqa, the Shazli school of Sufism. Ibn al-Abbas himself was a student of the founder of the Shazli school of thought in Sufism. So he was actually a student of Shazli. And Ibn Ata al-Sakandari, while a lot of Sufis, like Shazli himself or even Ibn Abbas al-Mursi, did not leave anything written, their legacy is known entirely through their students. Luckily, Ibn Ata al-Sakandari himself wrote a number of books, and it is said, although there's always this scholarly debates about, but it is said that his very first piece of writing, his very first production, was the book known as the book of Kitab al-Hikam, or the book of aphorisms, which is, we'll probably use this translation most of the time. Okay, so what is it about? This in itself, there is a debate as to what was the very purpose of this book and what Ibn Ata al-Sakandari was accomplishing as a student and as someone who journeyed from the realm of law to the realm of Sufism. He remained a legal expert, but his focus has shifted from expounding upon legal matters to focusing on spirituality and the Sufi journey. Okay, so were these hikam, were these aphorisms, which is, there are, the book itself has about, I think, 246 of these aphorisms, or the exact, I don't remember the exact number, and then he included a number of treatises or letters which which read like spiritual supplications. We're not going to focus on the last part of the book, the treatises or the letters, and his munajah, his appeals to God. The Hikam themselves, what were they? Were they his record of his journey, his transformation, his spiritual growth, if you will? So were they entirely impressionistic and personalized and subjective? Or were they set out methodologically in a particular order intended by Ibn Ata al-Sakandari himself in order to chart out a path for others to achieve spiritual elevation? That's an ongoing debate, and there are about some 30, 40 commentaries that were written on Al-Hikam throughout Islamic history. Not all of them are published. In fact, most of them are not. The published ones, they are about 6 or 8. And even the published ones, not all of them are in print anymore. But 6 or 8 were published at one time or another, and then we have in manuscript forms 30 or 40 commentaries. And unlike our journey with the Quran, I did not read all the commentaries. And my experience with the Hikam was largely through the medium of a series of lectures that I heard about the Hikam from a sheikh who had a very particular approach to the Hikam. He believed that the Hikam, he didn't believe that in writing a commentary on the Hikam. And he believed that the Hikam is not to be intellectually analyzed and understood, but to be practiced. That they chart out a course of actual practice. So either you commit to internalizing each aphorism, each hikmah, and commit to exercising that hikmah in your life, or there's no point. And moreover, he also believed that the order of the Hikam, the order chosen by Ibn Ata al-Sakandari was quite intentional. That Ibn Ata al-Sakandari was setting out or charting in say chronological order, in a purposeful, intentional order, a path to spiritual elevation. Now, there are others who have reorganized the Hikam, these articles of wisdom, thematically. Because if you delve into the Hikam, you'll notice that Ibn Ata al-Sakandari himself did not organize them thematically. And so, now, I'm not going to approach them thematically. I'm going to approach them in the order that Ibn Ata himself set out the Hikam. I tend to believe that Ibn Ata was not just simply memorializing chance thoughts about his spiritual journey, but in fact, that there was a considerable amount of intentionality and purpose, and a considerable amount of thought in the way that Ibn Ata al-Sakandari himself organized his Hikam. Okay, now the Hikam and this text, Kitab al-Hikam, needless to say, it had a huge impact on the Islamic intellectual tradition. It's probably rivals in impact Ghazali's book Ihya Ulumuddin, and in many ways it is a more profound work, and in my opinion a more challenging work, considerably more challenging work than Ihya Ulumuddin. Normally, the people who study the Hikam are people who are committed to a Sufi path. And normally, the purpose of studying the Hikam is to elevate within a tariqah to, in the course of a Sufi journey, this is not the way that I will approach the Hikam, for the simple reason that I am not qualified to lead anyone on a Sufi journey. There is a great deal within these aphorisms, a great deal in the language of these articles of wisdom, if you will, that are code words within the Sufi tradition. So for instance, when Ibn Ata al-Sakandari uses the word tajreed, tajreed could mean abstinence, could mean isolation, it has many meanings. But he is using the word intentionally within the Sufi tradition. And so he is invoking all the things that if you are an expert in Sufism, you would know by simply saying the word tajreed. And so if in fact we were studying this within the context of a Sufi tariqah, this is precisely would be the methodology, is that we would delve into what each term means within the Sufi tradition, and not only within the Sufi tradition, but quite specifically within the Shazli tariqah, not the Rifa'iyya, not the Naqshbandiyya, but the Shazli tariqah, Shazliya, and go on a path of elevation to achieve different maqamat. Each maqam is a station of elevation until you get from the lowest maqam to the highest maqam. But as I said, I am not a Sufi master. I don't belong to a Sufi tariqah. I don't have a Sufi tariqah. And that's not the approach that I will take to the Hikam. You could, if you find a Sufi master and who will take you through the Hikam, and your experience with the Hikam will not be a series of halaqas or halaqat that you attend and you just listen. It will be an actual journey of practice where there are extensive exercises with each aphorism that you study, and therefore, in fact, the 246 articles of wisdom would not be covered in the course of 6 months or a year, but in fact, because you are practicing them and because you are elevating from one maqam to another, it could take many years. And if a short span of time would be 3 to 5 years, and a norm within a normal span of time would be 10 to 15 years, until you complete this journey. So if we're not going on a Sufi tariqa and that's not the path that we are adopting, so what are we doing with the Hikam? The Hikam have another function, and that is getting the common Muslim, the average Muslim, to understand the difference between 3 main stations, 3 main objectives, 3 main journeys in life. The first is Islam. The second is Iman. And the third is Ihsan. How, when you take the Shahada and you follow the laws of Islam, you abide by the articles of faith, that is Islam. But that is the most superficial of stations. Iman, as Allah tells us in the Quran, don't say that لا تقولوا آمنتم, don't say that you are mu'mineen, say that you قولوا أسلمتم, say that you are just Muslims. Because Iman is a station of sincerity, where, as we will talk about, you are not responding. Your relationship to your Maker is not guided by deference to commands. Put differently, what motivates you is not punishment and reward, but what motivates you is a true awareness of al-jalala, a true awareness of the supremacy and the majesty and the beauty of God. You are not motivated by benefit or punishment. What motivates you is that you embrace the truth. It is the truth in and of itself that drives you Because once you understand the truth, your senses are overcome by that truth. And the third station, which is ihsan, is the perfection of the proper balance between your Islam and your Iman. It is an elevation from being about solely yourself and the relationship of the self to Allah, to radiating outwards, so that once you've internalized God's majesty, you radiate outwards because you've internalized the sense of God's beauty. There is a famous hadith where as the tradition goes, that an angel appears in the form of a human being, comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and then says, "What is Islam?" And the Prophet answers, "What is Iman?" And the Prophet answers, and every time this man says, "Correct." And then says, "What is ihsan? What is Islam? What is Iman? What is ihsan?" And the Prophet answers, and the man says, "Correct." And the companions are surprised, because who is this man that they've never seen before that comes up to the Prophet and says, "What is Islam? What is Iman? What is ihsan?" And every time the Prophet answers, he says, "Correct." And so what, who are you to be telling the Prophet correct? And then the Prophet explains that this was an angel in the form of a human being. The substance of the narrative is what is important. Because in response to what is ihsan, the Prophet ﷺ answers that you worship Allah as if you see Allah. You worship God as if you see God. And if you don't see God, in full awareness that God sees you. Now, imagine if you actually internalized a sense of God's actual presence. Imagine if your psyche actually internalized that sense of seeing God. And imagine if you are truly conscious all the time that you are in God's sight, never absent from God's sight. If you behave differently in the presence of your parents than if your parents are not present, you behave differently in the presence of someone that has power and authority. So if you are invited, if you work in a corporation and you are invited to meet the chief executive officer, your conduct before that person is different than your conduct if you're not in the presence of that person. Same thing if you are invited to meet a president of a country, if you're invited to meet a judge, a Supreme Court justice. what you allow yourself to do or not do, to say or not say, is directly impacted by what your psyche, the way your psyche interprets that presence. Now, what if you truly internalized? It is not just an abstraction. It's not an intellectual idea. It's not a concept. But you truly internalized that you are fully in Allah's presence. This is what we call maqam al-mushahada. The maqam, the station of witnessing. What are you witnessing? You are witnessing the reality that you are constantly in God's presence. When you are in the presence of, let's say, the president of a country, I mean, this is a silly example, but it conveys a message. You might have an itch, but you don't scratch it because you're in the presence of the president. You might feel all types of things, inconveniences, discomforts, but what you are constantly thinking of, this is a man of power and authority. Will I, whatever I do, will I slight this man, disrespect this man, upset this man? Now think, what if you truly understood that you are in Allah's presence? Not a human being, but fully God, your maker, the Lord of everything. Would you be able, if you truly, if you truly internalized maqam al-mashahada, the attention that you pay to the self and the grievances of the self and the pettiness of the self would be drastically affected, because God is in your eyesight and you are in God's eyesight. That state where you are fully cognizant of God's presence and fully cognizant of yourself in God's eyesight is conducive to the production of nothing but ihsan. This is what the Prophet ﷺ. Now, this ilm, al-ilm al-arfani, what is this knowledge of Islam, Iman, Ihsan, has a lineage, and we know the individuals. So it goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, but it passes through Ali radiallahu anhu, and from Ali to Al-Hasan, who plays a huge role in and then the lineage continues until it gets to the main key individuals in this knowledge like, Shazli or Jilani or Ibn Arabi or and so on. Or Junayd, who again is a very important link in this lineage. But in order to better understand, when we talk about that this knowledge has a lineage, and that Ibn Ata al-Sakandari himself, when he sets out the aphorisms, he is expressing or re-articulating a system of knowledge that has a lineage that goes back to Imam Ali himself. So I was debating whether I should do Hikam al-Ata'iyya or whether I should do Nahj al-Balagha. Now, Nahj al-Balagha is, I don't want to get into these debates about authenticity, because I do believe that most of Nahj al-Balagha, in fact, does go back to Imam Ali. That this whole nonsense about people who don't like the Shia, try to raise questions about, Nahj al-Balagha really. But if you truly understand Nahj al-Balagha itself, it is a mirror image of al-Hikam al-Ata'iyya. But in studying Nahj al-Balagha, we would have to do a lot of theoretical, tough work, hands-on work to extract the summation of wisdom that comes from Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. And what Ibn Ata really did is it brilliantly, and I firmly believe that Ibn Ata, as reports tell us, had memorized, we have numerous reports that he had memorized Nahj al-Balagha. But it is clear the link between Nahj al-Balagha and al-Hikam al-Ata'iyya, and that's why ultimately I decided to do Hikam al-Ata'iyya instead of Nahj al-Balagha. Although, modern Muslims lost their relationship to Nahj al-Balagha and Imam Ali, which is one of the main reasons for the deviation of modern Islam from the true path. Because that text, the presence of that text in the Islamic tradition, and the fact that it is ignored by the vast majority of Muslims, is nothing short of disastrous. You're not just ignoring the Quran, but then we're also ignoring other foundational texts that anchor us in understanding how do we get to the state of ihsan. Put differently, Islam as a system of laws gets you nowhere. All it gets you is in the most superficial and minimal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ultimate goal of Islam is ihsan. But how do we get there? Well, you can study the Quran and internalize the Quran. You can study Nahj al-Balagha and internalize Nahj al-Balagha. You can study those who have studied the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, and the problem with the ahadith is that it is like a huge forest, and ihsan, unless you are a refined scholar, gets lost in the weeds of the ahadith. What the great scholars like Junayd or Ibn Ata is that out of this huge corpus of competing orientations, they were able to extract from it what is conducive to ihsan or what leads you to ihsan. So for instance, we know from an Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, who taught us that كمال الأدب مع كل من الخالق والمخلوق، لأن الأدب مع المخلوق فرع من الأدب مع الخالق. So Imam Ali radiallahu anhu taught us that adab, proper ethics with al-Khaliq, with the Creator, is part and parcel of adab with the created. That you cannot separate the two. You cannot say, I am a person endowed with adab, proper ethics and morality, with my Creator, but somehow it's missing with the created. It is an irreconcilable contradiction. It's an oxymoron. There is no way you can match it. A lot of people who don't understand the difference that don't understand that the point of Islam is to get you to ihsan, will in fact have this misimpression that they can be cruel, they can be immoral, they can be unjust with the created and somehow still be fine with the Creator. You see, that's an impossibility. The evidence that you understand maqam al-shuhud, that you understand the station of perception, that Allah is present, ever present, is beautification, is that you exude beauty with your Creator and exude beauty with the created. So you are humble before your Creator because you cannot be arrogant. You are caring. You are full of compassion and mercy and benevolence. But there is no way that you can have these qualities in your relationship with your Creator if they are not manifested with the created. That is why the Prophet ﷺ, and I tell you that it goes all the way to Imam Ali and then the Prophet, says, for instance, إن من أكمل المؤمنين إيمانا أحسنهم خلقا وألطفهم بأهله. Among the mu'mineen, the believers, those who have the most perfected iman is ihsan. Those who have the most perfected iman are ahsanuhum khuluqa, those whose ethics and morality is most elevated. وَأَلْطَفَهُمْ بِأَهْلِهِ. Al-lutf here is friendliness and kindness, who are the most friendly, the most gentle, the most kind with their families. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling you that husnul khuluq, when you want to understand what good ethics are manifested through al-lutf, that are manifested through kindness, generosity, tenderness, humility, and that it is indivisible. You can't be kind with the stranger and mean to your family. You can't be kind to your family and mean with the stranger. Ihsan is a maqam, a status, where you are permeated with beauty and exude beauty. So you care, and that caring is manifested in dealing with family, in dealing with non-family, a gentleness of heart, a humility of the soul. The Prophet ﷺ, for instance, and this is, there are numerous, I just, picked a couple, but we can sit here and till tomorrow talk about these ahadith in which the Prophet emphasizes husnul khuluq, elevated morality. So one of them, for instance, where the Prophet ﷺ says, إن المؤمن لا يدرك بحسن الخلق درجة الصائم القائم. A Muslim who has, or a mu'min who has elevated morality, proper ethics, has the status in Allah's eyes, someone who is constantly fasting and staying up the nights worshiping. So when God looks at you, husnul khuluq itself, that status of ihsan, proper morality, elevated morality, beautiful norms that are beautiful, gives you the status of someone who is close to Allah by constant worship, constant ibadah. Or when the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, says, إِنَّ مِنْ خِيَارِكُمْ أَحْسَنَكُمْ أَخْلَاقًا, that amongst the best of you are those. So this constant emphasis on husnul khuluq, elevated morality, the status of ihsan, that you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are constantly in the presence of the divine, as you are aware that you are yourself is in the divine's presence. Okay, but of course the question then, how do we get there? And how do we understand this relationship? Among the most important foundations to comprehend before we even start in even the very first hikmah, the very first article of wisdom, this is a rephrasing of something in Nahj al-Balagha. من بلغ إلى حقيقة الإسلام لم يقدر أن يفطر عن العمل. ومن بلغ إلى حقيقة الإيمان لم يقدر أن يلتفت إلى العمل بسوى الله. ومن بلغ إلى حقيقة الإحسان لم يقدر أن يلتفت إلى أحد سوى الله. So here, if you understand the truth of Islam, if you develop a truthful relationship to Islam, you would never want to refrain from al-amal, from deeds. What deeds? Good deeds. Deeds either worshipping Allah or serving others. But you understand that the meaning of submission to Allah is articulated through deeds. But then, if you understand the truth of Iman, what Iman truly is, you will understand that it is not about the deeds, but about your relationship to the Lord, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That all the deeds, if they do not come from a sincere and a profound relationship to Allah, in fact, they're meaningless. So that praying 100 rakahs that do not bring you closer to Allah is meaningless. Without the deeds, indeed, a relationship is not possible. Those who say, because those who claim, I have a relationship to God. What is your relationship to God? Well, I talk to God and I say, I love you or whatever. But there are no deeds. Your relationship is not tested. There is nothing that has tested this relationship. But if you have the deeds, but the deeds do not result in an evolving relationship to Allah, then there is really something wrong with the very dynamic of your deeds. ومن بلغ إلى حقيقة الإحسان لم يقدر أن يلتفت إلى أحد سوى الله. So, however, now, Islam, you become compelled to perform deeds. Iman, you understand that your deeds are not the objective, are not the purpose, but the deeds are a means to an end, and the end is Allah. Now, if you understand the truth of Ihsan, you get to the status of Ihsan, you truly understand that all that matters is that you are in Allah's presence. Allah is present before you, and you are in Allah's presence all the time. So in fact, you become thoroughly consumed. You exude beauty, you perform beauty, but constantly what is on your mind, in your soul, in your heart, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, concretely, what happens? Well, to put it simply, all that matters is whether these deeds, the service that you perform, what concretely that means, the service you perform for the sake of Allah. And the pleasure that you feel is the pleasure of being close to Allah. And hence, you're human, you're going to experience disappointment. But it is your relationship to Allah that drives you. And so disappointment never defeats you. Whether you serve and there's gratitude, whether you serve and there are benefits, whether you serve and there are returns, really do not matter. Because what matters is your awareness of in your relationship to Allah. What does Allah, how does this service or deed or fa'al affect Allah's pleasure and your love for Allah and Allah's love for you? And this is now in Maqam al-Irfan, when we get to the highest level. What ties you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that you fall in love. You fall in love because Allah cannot be but loved. Allah is the source of everything that is beautiful and everything that is good. Allah gives endlessly. Allah is beautiful through Allah's very essence. And something that is truly beautiful, you cannot relate to it through anything except love. The only thing, that is what Sufis say, that all beauty that you see in life, you meet a beautiful human being and you tell yourself, you know, this human being is so beautiful. What they say, what they think, what they do is all beautiful. And when Sufis say, this is but a manifestation of the beauty of the Maker. So if you tell yourself, you know, I cannot but love this person, well, how about the Maker of this person? Because whatever beauty you saw manifested in this human being is but a minute iota of the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in the mushahada, the awareness of the presence of the divine leads to a state of ihsan that comes from love. And that is the most beautiful ihsan. Because it is not just that you are exuding beauty and doing what is beautiful, but you are doing it with love. You are in a state of constant satisfaction and peace and tranquility because you are in a state of love. You are in love. You know, when someone is in love and they're constantly in a good mood and they're very pleasant and they like, well, that is even, you know, multiply that in I don't know how many times, but that is the relationship that you come to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A world apart from a relationship where you do because you want to be rewarded or because you want to avoid being punished. And here, the love replaces entirely the carrot and the stick. In fact, they mean nothing to you anymore. I love you even if there is no reward. I love you even if there is no punishment. I love you because I have no choice but to love you. So, what is it that Ibn Ata al-Sakandari was exposed to that made them fall in love with Ibn al-Abbas al-Mursi? And what is it that made him change his entire path? Well, the reports tell us, this is what was narrated by Ibn Ata himself, that when asked, Ibn al-Abbas started setting out to Ibn Ata al-Sakandari the truth or a profound understanding of Islam. And we have a bit of that conversation. So, we said that there is the Amal al-Islam, pursuing Islam, Amal al-Iman, and Amal al-Ihsan, right? We said that there are these three stages: Islam, Iman, Ihsan. These three correlate to al-Sharia, al-Tariqa, and al-Haqiqa. Al-Sharia, al-Tariqa, and al-Haqiqa. So, Sharia is the realm of laws, the correlation to Islam, where you relate to God, primarily knowing God simply through what God told you to do or not to do. But imagine if you related to another human being simply through what this human being tells you to do or not to do. Well, you know, you could be in school and you have the superintendent of your school, and you don't know the superintendent of your school at all except through the rules. If you break the rules, you're going to be punished. If you follow the rules, you're rewarded. To what extent are you aware of any genuine truth about the superintendent? Do you really have a relationship to the superintendent? Yes, you follow the rules. But let's assume for whatever reason the superintendent, there is a reason to get to know the superintendent. Well, you're not going to get to know the superintendent through the rules. Well, same with those who relate to Islam simply through the rules. They really know Islam, but know it very superficially, and same as to God. They think it's all about heaven and hell. But heaven and hell in itself is a narcissistic pursuit. It's all about the me. I want to be rewarded. I don't want to be punished. Well, you're like a child. You are a child. You have nothing greater than that. Amal al-tariqah, which correlates to Iman, is the path to knowledge, the path to awareness, the development of a commitment to sincerity. What are you committing to? I am committing to looking beyond the veil of law. What I am committing to is that I want to know my Maker beyond the veil of law. What are these laws about? That's a question, an issue, but it's an intellectual pursuit. But who is this majesty that gave us these laws? Amal al-haqiqah, which correlates to ihsan, is when your relationship now is based, relationship to your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on truth, not based on a veil of superficiality, but based on truth. And notice, what is the truth again? It goes back to that concept that you are in Allah's presence. That when you are sitting anywhere, walking anywhere, you're never alone. You are in Allah's presence, so behave accordingly, act accordingly, feel accordingly. You know how, this is from my sheikh who gave me this example a long time ago. You know how, of course this is in a culture where it actually, honored sheikhs and honored knowledge. And, he said, your brother could do something that really irritates you. And if you're home, you might lose it with your brother. You will start fighting with your brother, arguing with your brother. But you come in the presence of the sheikh and your brother does the same thing. And you politely smile and control your irritation and control your anger because you are in the presence of your sheikh. Translated to American terms, because unfortunately we don't care about that. Let's say you are in the presence of the chief executive officer in your corporation. It's not just that your behavior changes, but your very emotions change. What you are willing to indulge, the way that you relate to reality changes. Now, al-haqiqah, truth, is when you understand, well, how about God's presence? Cut this nonsense. You're in the presence of your teacher, you're in the presence of chief executive officer, you're in the presence of, the richest human being in the world, you're in the presence of a Hollywood star, you are in the presence of Allah. That is the haqiqah. That is the haqiqah. How do you get from a sharia, adopt the tariqah to get to the haqiqah? That is why if you know the law but you don't know the haqiqah, the law will produce horrible results. Because you do not have a relationship to beauty or morality or goodness. And so you apply the law as if the law is its own objective and purpose. I remember once there was a married couple And these couple, they were, they fought all the time, constantly fighting. And they would marry and divorce until they got to the third time, the last time. In the mess, and even to make things worse, it is not even clear when they married and when they divorced, because every time they fight, the husband says the word of talaq, and so it's not clear when the husband uttered talaq in anger, when he uttered it for real. It was just an absolute mess. In the midst of this mess, a child was born. And there is a real question, was that child born out of wedlock or in wedlock? Because of all the mass divorces and marriages. And when you understand the haqiqah behind the sharia, you bend backwards and forwards to do what? To make that child born into wedlock or out of wedlock? To make the child born into wedlock. Because to punish the child with the sins of the parents and have this child grow saying, I was born out of wedlock, you miss the point of Sharia completely. So I advised them, I went out of my way to find the child born out of wedlock. The woman in particular, in this case, was outraged at me. Oh, what type of law is this? Oh, you're bending the law to achieve it. I mean, as crazy as it is, she wanted her child, I guess, to be deemed born out of wedlock. She's not, again, is punishing the child. And you just feel very sad because these people don't understand. But take this example and see how often in modern Islam we apply the Sharia to horrendous results, cruel results, barbaric results, because we've lost the tariqah and we have no relationship to the haqiqah. It is impossible that Sharia would contradict ihsan, morality, ethics, unless Sharia has lost its way. And this is precisely what exists. Do you see why it's so important when we say the difference between Islam, Iman, Ihsan, the difference between Sharia, Tariqah, and Haqiqah? To even blow your mind further, as reportedly Imam Ibn Abbas al-Mursi explained to Ibn Ata, told him the difference between ibadah, ubudiyya, and abuda. Now, ibadah, we know, to worship. Ubudiyya, we sort of know, to submit to Allah. But what is abuda? Al-abuda. Al-abuda يعني الحرية, freedom, liberty. Note here. So, Islam, Sharia is ibadah. Is to worship, to obey. Iman is ubudiyya, to submit, to surrender. Okay, I understand there's something greater than me. And to embrace what is greater than you. But that submission and surrender gets you to what? To the equivalent of ihsan or haqiqah. And that is al-ubuda. What is al-ubuda? al-ubuda is to true liberty and true freedom. That in fact, you either will accept al-ubudiyya to the material world, possibly to the demonic in the material world, because many of us in fact submit to demons, and sometimes these demons, as I said in the khutbah, are ourselves. Sometimes we become the demons and we submit to the demons of ourselves. And some of us, unfortunately, have real demons, actual demons attached to them. And they submit to these demons. They worship these demons. And even if it's not demons, it's the hedonistic, meaningless, empirical, material world. None of this will give you true freedom, because none of this leads you to haqiqah. None of this leads you to ihsan, to beauty. None of this leads you to love. You will not be in love with the truth of your existence if your existence ultimately distills itself to the demonic or simply the soulless material. But when you reach that point of love, you attain true freedom, because if you are following the law, you understand the law that you follow, why you follow it, and the way that in fact following the law empowers you and liberates you. But the law serves you, and that is where the liberty comes. Ultimately, the law becomes at your service. You are not serving the law. Because what your real relationship and what truly guides you is your relationship with the haqiqah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a status of liberty, al-ubuda. Now, of course, in our modern age, you never hear that word. No one ever talks about that al-ibadah and al-ubudiyya leads to al-hurriyyah. It is treated as if it is some radical idea born of political Islam. This goes back to Imam Ali radiyallahu anhu and al-Hasan radiyallahu anhu, who were the master students of the Prophet ﷺ. This is not some radical new idea of political Islam or liberal Islam. They speak of عمل أهل البداية, عمل أهل الوسط, and عمل أهل النهاية. And this is much simpler. Those who are beginners, the bidayah. Those who are medium level, sort of al-wasat, those who are on the path. And أهل النهاية, those who have reached, those who have arrived. As Imam Ibn Abbas explained to Ibn Ata at the time, that says الشريعة أن تعبده والطريقة أن تقصده والحقيقة أن تشهده. Sharia is that you worship God. الطريقة, the path, the middle. أن تقصده is that your objective in all you do would be God. Not punishment or reward, but God for God's self. والحقيقة, and the truth, the third stage, أن تشهده. It's as if you see God. You are fully cognizant and aware of God. They also say, and it is reported by Ibn Ata, that this is what, again, Ibn Abbas wowed him with at the time, that الشريعة لإصلاح الظواهر والطريقة لإصلاح الضمائر والحقيقة لإصلاح السرائر. That الشريعة is designed to regulate and fix only the outer superficial limits. But الطريقة, the intermediary path, is designed to fix the conscience, the intentionality, the sincerity. But al-haqiqah is to fix your nature. So from your actions to your intentions to your very nature. Okay, it goes on, but I think this is sufficient. This is because Ibn Ata was a deeply reflective human being. As reportedly Ibn Abbas laid out this whole, just laid it out, this and much more is what led Ibn Ata to follow Ibn Abbas for 12 years and to be on a path and a trajectory that left the amazing texts and studies that he left for us. But what Ibn Ata himself understood later on is that what he heard from Ibn Abbas at the time was, as I said, a knowledge, a ilm, that is transmitted from the prestige or the most blessed of the Prophet ﷺ students, Imam Ali, to his grandson Al-Hassan, and of course Al-Hussein died young, but what we know of him. But then it goes on from there. There's more. I mean, I hesitate because I don't want to, give you. But, like for instance, they say that to fix the Sharia level, you need tawbah and taqwa and istiqamah. That to fix the outer level, the superficial level, you need first a repenting soul. Taqwa and istiqamah, a true will to be pious, to be God-fearing. And istiqamah, an intentionality to commit to the path. But second level, to fix what is in the heart, your intentionality, the tariqah. بثلاثة أمور: الإخلاص والصدق والطمأنينة. That you work on your sincerity, that you commit to truthfulness. You don't BS yourself. You don't lie to yourself. You don't lie to others. You don't make excuses. You don't deflect blame. والطمأنينة, surrender. So And then وإصلاح السرائر, to fix your nature, to then reach that third stage, الحقيقة, الإحسان. You need three: المراقبة والمشاهدة والمعرفة. المراقبة in short is to train yourself to be always cognizant of God's presence. المشاهدة is through diligent reorienting your consciousness. I mean, in modern age, redirecting the pathways in your brain, you actually perceive the majestic and the sublime. In Sufi experiences, if we were training in a Sufi tariqah, we would do all these exercises that last for a month in order to attain al-mushahada, where you actually start seeing the luminous and the illuminating. And the third, al-ma'rifah, is the highest state of altering the sara'ir, altering your nature, where finally all the veils are lifted and you achieve true knowledge of reality, in which you see God in everything, and in fact you realize that there is really nothing but God. But okay. But I'll talk about one other thing. But so just so you know how this works, that we'll say that Islah al-Zawahir, you fix your external, the Sharia level, باجتناب الأوامر, by in fact وامتثال الأوامر, that you actually obey the law. So that's the first level. Second level, وإصلاح الضمائر التخلي عن الرذائل والتحلية بأنواع الفضائل. That the second level, the tariqah, the iman, as we said, al-ubudiyya, is that you work diligently to rid yourself of all your base desires: envy, hate, jealousy, miserliness, all the qualities that are base. You work to cleanse them out so that your intentionality can be sincere and true. And at the same time, you work on the attainment of fada'il. You work on the attainment of virtues. وإصلاح السرائر, that where the changing of of your very nature, the third stage, the stage of al-haqiqa or al-ihsan. Here, you become the embodiment of adab. Adab, proper manners, tawadu, humility, and husnul khuluq, that your very nature is consistent with whatever elevated ethics call for. Now, just part of the if this was a Sufi path, one of the things that they do is to intentionally give away, but we're not on a Sufi journey. is intentionally give away everything that is dear to you. Because your attachment to physical and material things will always obstruct and impede your love of the ethereal things. So to truly love Allah, whether you have the material or you don't have the material, is all the same to you. Now, our path, as I said, is not the Sufi path. But what we can learn from Al-Hikam al-Ata'iyya are pearls of wisdom that hopefully, insha'Allah, would help us attain something of a better iman and something of better ihsan. I am not a Sufi master and I'm not qualified to lead anyone on the Sufi path. I'm lucky if I can lead myself anywhere. But what we can learn from this ocean of wisdom, an ocean of knowledge, an ocean of beauty, elevating concepts that, insha'Allah, bring us closer to a relationship of ihsan in our lives. Let's take a break, pray Maghrib, and then we'll come back and continue. Okay, we'll just pray Maghrib. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so all of this is by way of introduction. And of course, how many of these aphorisms will we cover, inshallah, in every halaqah? I'm not sure, but you know, there are 246. To have any practical chance of finishing them within a reasonable time, you know, I'll try to cover a few. Tonight, inshallah, I plan to cover only the first, the very first. And it shouldn't take much longer. But I want to also, there is in the literature that surrounds Al-Hikam al-Ata'iyya, and it's not just Al-Hikam al-Ata'iyya, but it is an expression, a language that you encounter very frequently in this kind of literature. So for instance, in the book Qut al-Qulub, it's addressed at length. Even the Ihya, it's there. Leave alone the works of the poetry of Junayd or the poetry of some Sufi masters like Al-Hallaj and so on. But the passage that I'm referring to, again, and it's the same theme of that we were talking about, Islam, Iman, Ihsan. And I'll paraphrase it. إن الله تعالى دعا الناس إلى التوحيد. So it usually goes something like this. لأنهم لا يدخلون إلى التوحيد من غير طمع. So Allah invited people to believing in knowing the Maker, because knowing the Maker is really knowing yourself, knowing who you are and why you are and what you are. But that Allah, knowing that human beings are in their most base selves, only function from the point of view of tama is self-interest, from the point of view of self-interest, that what motivates them, what drives them, is maximizing their interest or avoiding harm. So Allah promised them فوعدهم الجزاء على العمل, that so Allah promised them a reward for deeds and also promised them punishment for misdeeds. But comes the second stage. فَلَمَّا رَسَخَتْ أَقْدَامَهُمْ, so when they become anchored in this, فَلَمَّا رَسَخَتْ أَقْدَامَهُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ أخرجهم من ذلك الحرف ورقاهم إلى إخلاص العبودية, that then Allah elevates them or teaches them to go beyond sheer submission or sheer Islam. Islam in the sense of just follow. And I follow for either to be rewarded or to avoid punishment. But Allah then elevates them to the second stage, and that is ikhlas, the sincerity and the purification of intention. وَالتَّحَقُّقْ بِمَقَامِ الْإِخْلَاص. So when that usually means is that to purify themselves in that station where they are, their gaze is moved from self-interest to an awareness of the truth of their status, that they are from the divine and to the divine. Now, then comes من مقام الإخلاص to التحقق بمقام الشهود, that then to lifting the veils so that they are anchored in the truth of things. And the truth of things is that light is but from God. Luminosity is but from God. Beyond God is darkness. Now, if you truly see truth for what it is, and that luminosity is but from God, and that beyond God there is darkness, that God is goodness itself. Beyond the goodness of God, there is the absence of goodness. So if you see reality for itself, and you see that in this vast existence, there is God, there is a light, the light, beauty. Beyond that light, you gaze and look and you see darkness, and in the darkness, terrifying creatures move. Demons. Demons will never want anything good for you, and will never wish anything good for you. In the darkness in which demons dwell, light has been vanquished from their being, and so what exists in their being is nothing but darkness, and therefore they can give you nothing but darkness. Wouldn't you be driven to reach that light beyond reward or punishment? Even if once the veil is lifted, even if you realize there is no reward and there is no punishment, I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm saying that in terms of your consciousness, wouldn't you be driven to the light? Because that is really the only thing that is beautiful and that is luminous, that exists. So what motivates you, what drives you, is no longer calculations of how am I going to benefit or how am I going to avoid harm. What drives you is the full awareness of the truth of the light, the truth of beauty, the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, is the internalizations of all these aphorisms, if we were in the old days and the way we approach things is to commit them to memory, and you commit them to memory and you internalize them completely and thoroughly, would they lead you to the maqam al-mushahada? And my answer to you is yes. I have never encountered someone who has truly internalized these aphorisms and who's not led to maqam al-mushahada, to the ultimate stage of actually living in the full sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the full awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, on the other side, we live in a day and age in which not too many people achieve that status. Because we are surrounded by distractions of everything but God. So we'll just take the very first one, and if you have, where did it go? If you have this book, you will see the very first article. And what Ibn Ata starts with is to tell you من علامات الاعتماد على العمل نقصان الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. The literal translation can go something like, a sign that one is relying on their own deeds is the loss of hope when they commit misdeeds, or when they fail, or when a failure occurs. So what is he talking about here? The Prophet ﷺ taught us in the famous hadith that, by the way, has the status of tawatur, is that none of us will make it to heaven on our good deeds. People ask the Prophet, even you? And he says, even me. On your deeds alone, that's not what will lead to your salvation, but your deeds and God's grace is God's mercy. So justice demands that you would not be the beneficiary of God's grace or God's mercy without deeds, because it would be unfair. But you have to understand that deeds are but a incomplete means. Your salvation is entirely, when all is said and done, depends on God's mercy and God's grace. So, yes, I do good deeds, but I do good deeds in order to attain an understanding of the nature of God's mercy and God's grace. God, let me put it in a little bit of a kindergarten level. How many good deeds does God do? Think of all the things that rule existence. Don't think of the way that human beings exercise their willpower in demonic ways, but think of all the things that Allah gives to sustain life, to allow for the countless living things that exist in life, the numerous gifts that God gave you, although you've given practically nothing, even whether the very nature of God is giving. And when you do good deeds, you partake in the divine nature. It is impossible to understand God's mercy or God's grace or God's attributes unless you partake in what God is. God has not allowed you to act as a God, so you are never allowed to relinquish humility. You are never allowed to go beyond your status. You are not a God. So you don't have the option of extending deeds beyond what is simply good. Now, so good deeds are a path to God's mercy, God's grace, both understanding it and receiving it. When human beings fail to understand or lose sight of the fact that they are dealing with Allah, a God who is beyond human pettiness, beyond human calculation of you've got enough brownie points or you don't have brownie points. Now, when they lose sight of that and things go wrong, so either they commit a sin or they go down the wrong path, or, whatever, they miscalculate things and things go awfully wrong, because they lose sight or they fail to understand the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They really think that just because they screwed up, that God is like a human being. Well, I'm so disappointed in you, now I don't love you anymore. They think like children. Well, I screwed up, so it must be that you don't love me anymore, you don't care about me anymore. That's actually an offense against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, a sign that you are stuck in Islam, you have not elevated to Iman, to Tariqah, or you have not elevated to Ihsan or Al-Haqiqah. You are still stuck at Al-Ibadah, Al-Islam, Al-Sharia. so that when you screw up, you despair. And your despair actually leads you quite often to give up. So, I've committed sin, what's the point now? If you understood your Lord, that would never be your attitude. There would never be a point in which you say, well, I screwed up, what's the point now? The God's majesty, God's beauty, God's grandeur, God's luminosity is always there. It never dims. It never weakens. It never goes away. And it is always ready to receive you again and again and again. It doesn't bother God or hurt God or take away from God to forgive. That's a human thing. We think, oh, I've forgiven many times, I would be bitter. Well, that's not God. That is the first thing you learn on the path. Don't ever be happy with your deeds. For after all, if Allah would have willed, you would have not done any good deeds. Your deeds are but a means to a purpose. And don't ever rely on your deeds. Trust in God's mercy and God's grace. That's what you bank on, not the deeds. The deeds are an appeal for God's mercy and God's grace. That's the first lesson to internalize, because it is a critical message on the path to ihsan. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And that concludes our first hikmah, our first aphorism.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Sheikh. This was really amazing. I think the most powerful thing about it is that this is a path for us, step by step, to reconnect with our tradition and really to bring to life, you know, our tradition, our history, something really beautiful and substantive that goes all the way back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Imam Ali and Hassan. And, you know, it's like, I think so much of your work, what really is so important for us is that it helps us, again, with this idea of individual excellence in our time and in our day and age. And it's so powerful, especially as a convert, you know, like it's really meaningful to know, like, what is the point, what's the path, what are the steps we take, what are the things that we need to do just with ourselves to get closer to God. Because we often talk about how we have to build our relationship with God, but this is so important and meaningful to understand sort of the micro steps. And you know, when you speak to us about our emotions, how we, you know, where we are on this journey, whether we're closer to Islam or Ihsan, you know, it also helps to explain like the state of the world we live in. Because when you look at other Muslims and you don't really understand like why do they do what they do, you know, it just helps the whole process of understanding your world and where you fit and what you can do to develop. And again, just building faith from the ground up. So, you know, the whole journey with the Quran was just so important foundationally. But then that's, you know, now taking it back to the beginning and like, okay, now we understand, you know, our book, but now what do we do? And so it's just so valuable. And I think the last thing that you said about the idea of, you know, when I screw up, Allah doesn't love me anymore. what's the point? Like, I can't even count how many times I've read, messages from people to us, or, or even felt this myself, or, just heard it from others. And it's so reassuring to just know that, no, this is a path that we just keep doing what we do, and that Allah is there to receive and to forgive and to be with us. And that's so empowering and so encouraging that, there's nothing that you should give up over, that Allah is still there with you. And so I think that, you gave us so much beauty and wisdom, and, and set the context for us. I'm so excited to know more, and just even the idea that if we go and internalize each of these steps, that can make such a difference. So thank you. This was really so powerful. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I just want to remind you to please subscribe to our new podcast. That's at usuli.supercast.com. And that's where you can actually submit your questions. And then, inshallah, we will do some Ask Me Anything questions. And then you guys can start listening also to this in podcast form, as well as other content. So thank you so much. We, have so much valuable work to do, and we can't do it without your support, and and share this with others, because I think this is what so many people are looking for, and when they find it, it's really life transforming. So thank you for being with us, and inshallah we will see you for the next episode. Inshallah. So
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.